He saw me. I ran. I knew I was faster, with 3 more locomotors than my pursuer. I quickly outstripped him, the distance between us growing, but I still could not shake the panic that pounded through my twin hearts. He faded away in the mists of the valley, but I could still sense his eyes on me. The forward-facing, focused stare of a predator species. Our own eyes were wide apart, one higher than the other, to scan the dips and peaks of our homeworld for danger. During first contact, it was a challenge, both practically and metaphorically, to look them in the eyes. It still was. I knew he would not stop. They taught us about them in our schools, the textbook's first chapter titled in bold, Relentless. I could not run forever. I had read about the humans. Persistence hunters, they called themselves. In other words, you ran from them until you could run no more, and then they would come. On the other hand, we were not made for endurance, but we had other talents that made us the dominant species on our world among a multitude of predators. There was a stream nearby, deep, wide, and cold. I had spent months playing by its banks during the long summer orbits of the planet. I could hear its noisy bubbling echoing from the cleft walls, the nostalgia it evoked cutting through the panic for just a second. Then, a sound from behind. I tilted my head up to peer behind myself. His silhouette heaved deep, raspy breaths from the top of the crater's edge. I could see his eyes glitter with the reflection of the setting sun. With an echoing step, he passed the threshold. My hooves trampled the taproots as I passed under the creeping tangle of vines with all the speed I could muster. As I ran, I looked up and a new idea sprang to my mind. Maybe there was another way to slow him. I doubted I could completely stop him. I slowed, then wrapped my limbs through the loops of the tangle and began to swing myself up. This is how we escaped from the bastics that hunted us in our primitive days. My long, grasping hooks clung to the entwined vines. Hook over hook I climbed until I reached the canopy, far above the valley floor. The wind felt good as it blew across my back, the air cold and misty on my face. I looked down and spotted his small figure below. He stood, seemingly perplexed, at the base of the taproots. He tentatively reached for a hanging tendril. I smiled, my teeth clicking as I stretched my jaw. Let's see him follow me up here. As if he had heard my challenge, he looked up at me and stretched his lips in their version of a smile. Freakish, all teeth, like a typical predator species. Then, to my utter amazement, he grabbed a tendril with his 2 arms and hauled himself off the blue ground. I almost fell out of the tangle in shock and then, embarrassment. How could I have forgotten? I saw a vision of my teacher smacking me with a rastang tail. Her voice echoed in my head. Humans, she sang, peering at me with disapproval, are evolved from tree climbers. Their ancestors not only took to the trees for safety from predation, as we do, but also for locomotion. They even constructed domiciles in the canopy. Stupid, stupid, stupid. I swung across the canopy as fast as I could. It would take him some time to catch up. I knew that stage of their evolution was tens of cycles ago. He would have the ability, but maybe not skill, to follow at my speed. Then again, I had underestimated them before. I kept my head up, one eye focused backwards, one eye forward. I couldn't see a sign of him, but I could hear the canopy quivering with his movements. Ahead, I saw the faint blue haze and the thinning of the tangle that told me my salvation was close at hand. By the time I reached the edge of the tangle, I was exhausted. My breath wheezed from my song tunnels and I dropped to the taproots in a crumpled heap. I could run no more. Still, I had made it. The river ran wide and deep, the far bank calling to me with its bubbling melody. I drew myself up, stretching my limbs to their utmost length. With my head pointed up, I was twice the human's height. I took a careful step into the water and shivered at its cold. My hooves scrabbled for purchase on the soft riverbed. The current was gentle, but I took my time. With each step, my panic lessened. I was almost safe. A crash alerted me to the edge of the forest. My head was already pointed up, so I caught a glimpse of the human dropping clumsily to the ground. He was panting, and his face had changed color to a deep red. When he saw my head pointing up out of the water, his mouth moved angrily. I couldn't hear what he said. My stalks were busy probing the ground for obstacles. I hauled myself out of the water, the rivulet streaming off my smooth back. I turned around and smiled. Click, click, click. The sound seemed to irritate him. He walked to the edge of the water and glared at me. I stared back as best I could. He had the familiar look of a predator denied. He knew his prey had escaped him. He paced back and forth at the edge. Then, suddenly, inexplicably, he fell into the stream. My jaw dropped open in a universal expression of surprise. Awed, I saw his head come up above the water. His limbs were thrashing wildly in panic and fear. Had he fallen in? I wasn't surprised. 2 locomotors and no balancing limb. Ridiculous. The inside joke was that Great Mother made a design mistake with these ones. I watched in morbid curiosity as the creature flailed. Oh well. The current would push him back to safety, but not before teaching him a valuable lesson. Then something made me pause. I looked closely, twisting my head to focus both eyes forward. He was closer than he was before. Instead of being pushed to the bank by the current, he was drifting into the center of the stream. No, not drifting. His arms still thrashed, but his head was upright and still staring at me. Impossible. It was impossible. I could not move. It was like something out of my father's horror stories. I saw it now. The wild motions of his arms weren't born of panic, but of intent, determination. His head bobbed, even dipping below the surface. Did he not need oxygen to survive? It made no sense. My limbs collapsed. There was only so much energy, and I had used it all in this last gamble. And it still wasn't enough. What world spawned these creatures? That ran, that climbed, that could move through water without touching the ground. That could live without breath. What sort of twisted evolutionary path had these monsters been down? A wet hand slapped the edge of the riverbank. Then another. Digging into the dirt, they flexed. The human's head surfaced out of the water. Those eyes stared into mine with predatory intent. The lips parted in that hideous stretchy expression, showing not 1, but 2 rows of white teeth. I could only lay there, trembling, as he slapped his locomotors on the ground, one after the other. Slap, slap, slap. 5 body lengths. Slap, slap. Then 3. Slap. Then 1. I closed my eyes. I heard his breath just beside my head. I tensed my limbs, determined to face the end without flinching. I felt a wet warm hand on my back. Tag, you're it. Feebly, I smiled as best I could. Can we play a different game this time? Author's name and link to original text is in the description.